simulation theory is just the way that modern people talk about basic religious concepts in a world that doesn't accept religion. And so, and no way we talk about the magnets and the fields and whatever. But yeah, we're talking about holiness and we're talking about spiritual reality. And so, of course, it's the case that some people are holier than other people and more attuned to this. Yeah. But the thing is, you can grow in holiness. And you can also turn away from the grace of God. And when you say, well, you can't give it to someone else, that's because it's about your relationship with God. It's not about your relationship with some other dude.
I had a guy tell me a story that he became Christian because he was doing drugs. He was in the woods. And then he woke up in the morning, strung out, hungover, went to go take a leak. And then all of a sudden felt this booming voice from within his own chest say, "What are you doing?" And it freaked him out. And then it said, "You are wasting your life. You have to stop this. You have to change." And he didn't know what it was, so he went and sought answers and then found, holy men who explained to him what this was, what it meant. He got clean, started a business, and lived a fulfilling life with his friends and became very responsible. And he went from a strung out drug addict, wasting away, into a productive member of society after having this profound moment. And he said to me, "I don't care if you don't believe me. It happened to me, and I can never give you that feeling, but I assure you I experienced it."
Oh, of course.
I was like, "No, I believe you." I mean,
it was a voice that sounded like, "Why, Saul of Tarsus, are you persecuting me?" These things happen. People have those road to Damascus moments. Yeah.
And I'm sure the secular atheist types might just say, "Well, he was on drugs and he was having a psychotic break or whatever." And I'll be like, call it whatever you want, explain it however you want. This person had a experience where they felt something that changed their life for the better. I'm totally okay with that.
I think sometimes your frontal lobe clouds your spiritual part of the brain, maybe, because when it quiets, when you can go into flow state and dim the activity in your frontal lobe, is when you really, time starts to lose meaning. I think it can kind of happen. And there's so much activity like stimulating the frontal lobe. My name, who am I? I exist in my frontal lobe. Without that, you're kind of part of it.
Do you wonder, Ian, though, if you're confusing the physical for the metaphysical? Like you're talking about this as if your brain is controlling everything, as if the physical world is controlling some aspect of your metaphysical understanding. But what if those two things are just occurring simultaneously, or what if it's going in the opposite direction? So now we say all the time, "I had such an adrenaline rush." We don't say "I got excited," right? We say I got a dopamine hit instead of "I felt happy." But why is the physical the only meaningful thing, when in fact the physical world alone can't have any meaning at all?
Let me bridge this with science. People who do DMT and break through the veil and then see some other kind of entity beyond this realm.
Usually demons.
Well, but you can call them demons, but why make that assumption? Some of them may be demons. What if some of them are more holy or something like that?
Well, I actually had a great interview. There's a little bit of a plug up for my YouTube channel. I had this 2-hour interview with a guy who was a total psychonaut, all into psychotropics and hallucinogens. And he thinks they're demons. But it's worth, if people want to go watch it, it's a 2-hour conversation. But yeah,
I'd be more inclined to believe they were demons, to be honest. But at the same time, a bit more agnostic on whatever people experience this, whatever they could be. But the only reason I bring it up is because if it is true that multiple people, I mean hundreds or thousands of people, have experienced some kind of consistent entity by taking this chemical, then when you, Ian, like as you were saying, you conflate the metaphysical with the physical. When you experience these things, it could be something beyond the veil reaching into you.
Yeah, I think I focus on the physical a lot because I feel like that's what I can control in the process. That like it's like a radio tuner. I can tune it to the right frequency, but I'm not making the music happen. So I'm just so evidence based. So I'm looking at like. But I think the magnetic field, it's like moving around the magnetic field, I believe you can, but it's like if you have a magnet in your hand and you're moving it underneath a piece of paper with all these iron fragments on top of the paper, the iron's moving, but are you moving the iron or are you moving the magnet? You're moving the magnet. The iron filings are just moving along.
I think you're still making the same epistemological error, though, which is you're saying that you're evidence-based, and so you want to ground everything physically. But the error here is the idea that reality is fundamentally physical, which it certainly is not. The fact that we have intelligible speech, the fact that symbols have meaning, that it can interpret, and that we rely on it all, tells you that the reality is fundamentally metaphysical, and there's evidence for that.
I think plasma
I got this, though,
where
Michael.
it starts to change.
Well, that's physical, too.
I got this because, Ian, you're a fan of Incubus.
I love Incubus.
And
Brandon Boyd, what's up, dog?
And they have that song where, I don't know if it's, which song it is, A Certain Shade of Green or something like that, where in the middle of the song, there's a recording of a guy who says, at the turn of the century, humans thought that what they could touch, smell, see, and hear was reality. But since the initial publication of the charged electromagnetic spectrum, humans have learned that what they can touch, smell, see, and hear is less than 1/1,000,000th of reality. So there you go.
That's a good line, actually, from Incubus, which is a kind of a demon.
Yeah, when you talk about
it literally is a demon.
When you talk about physics, what's physical, they used to think it was solid, liquid, and gas. And then all of a sudden, at some point, they realized, oh, plasma is a fourth state of physical matter. There's more physical stuff than we realized. And when you look at clouds of plasma moving around, I don't think they're intelligent, but there seems to be a sentience involved with the way that plasma, like, it doesn't move like a cloud in the air. It moves
you're a physical thing, and you are sentient also, but the sentience isn't from your consciousness, your rationality is not from your physical body. You're just a clump of cells in your physical body. Your reason comes from your rationality.
Yeah, I'll put it this way: we're playing a video game. It's not a simulation; it's a video game, and we are entities that exist beyond the physical bodies, but we are occupying them to facilitate this simulated experience.
In plasma clouds, there's these things called plasmon in the center of plasma clouds. And when they're hit with photons, with light, it causes the plasma cloud to react. So it's like information is being transferred from light into plasma, which is then cooling down into gas and then into liquid and then into solid.
But that doesn't have to be a conscious process. Physical things react to stimuli, right?
It seems like a sentient process, not necessarily conscious.
But like if I threw, let's say I threw an explosive like those people last night at Pitt. If I threw an explosive at that wall, the wall would react, and there'd be a hole in the wall or a dent in the wall. But the wall's not conscious.
I think you're right. I think consciousness is like living organisms seem to have consciousness. Not necessarily organisms, because then it'd be carbon-based, but like living things have consciousness, but unliving things have sentience, it seems like. Like when they say God is, I don't think God is conscious, I think it's sentient.
Well, so God is consciousness, right? God is reason. But if you're talking about sentience in the sense that one can feel sensations, like an animal or even simpler organisms can react to certain stimuli, they can feel pain, say. That's true. And when we talk about consciousness, we're usually talking about rational consciousness, so we can discuss abstract things. We can talk about justice, but an ape or a plant can't talk about justice, right?
I think Ian desperately wants to believe in God.
He does. Every time I'm here, I just think you're so close, but you keep falling into all this new age.
We're talking about a different thing when we say God, because if there's a conscious God, he's looking for a personal relationship with us as individuals. And if there's a God who's not conscious, but he's sentient somehow.
Well, no. But what I'm saying is, the questions Ian asks sound more like a please make me understand.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I used to be agnostic, and then I saw the cosmic microwave background radiation. I was like, okay, I'm evidence guy. That is evidence of God. That is looks like a neural net.
But everything is. I mean, I remember I had this when I was an atheist. I was sitting out having a cigar in my little front porch, and I had this tiny little house in New York, and I had this dead rose bush. The thing was it wasn't like a beautiful thing that I was looking at, but I was sitting there and I was looking at the leaves and the complexity of the leaves on this dying rose bush. And I thought, there's got to be some logic here. There's got to be. Why is that so complex? Why is that conveying meaning to me? Even this totally quotidian thing. And it wasn't the biggest push in my becoming a Christian and believing that God exists, but it was another piece of evidence, which is the evidence of meaning and intelligence is all around us. It's here. It's even in the stupid book, Genderqueer.
That Fibonacci sequence, that golden ratio, keeps showing up in reality.
Because there's a structure to the universe. There's a logic and there's a math, and we are only you're like, wow, the golden ratio is everywhere. But in reality, it's just you noticing a tiny little piece of the logic of the universe that exists.
Sometimes I wonder if I'm looking through the lens of the spiraling galaxy. There's 3 types of galaxies. There's irregular galaxies, which is like a star cluster. Then they become a spiral galaxy where it starts to spin. Then they form up into a spheroid galaxy. And I feel like we're in a transition towards the spheroid. But I wonder if because we're in a spiral, other things look like they're spiraling. So we're only seeing the Fibonacci sequence from our perception because we're wearing spiral glasses.
Perhaps. So we'll dive into the subject matter just because it came up, and I think it's a good opportunity with having you here, because Seamus will be back next week. We're really excited for Seamus Coughlin of Freedom Tunes. He'll be hanging out. And
Seamus is going to be the one to actually get you, Ian. I can maybe push a little bit on the apologetics, but Seamus is a Shiite Wahhabi Catholic who has an answer for absolutely everything.
He's a smart guy.
And he is. He's a very
But
intelligent guy.
I want to make this point for those that haven't heard it. because we briefly mentioned that simulation theory is the language used by, how did you describe it?
It's just the way modern people talk about religion because they don't know how to talk about religion. So it just seems more relatable for people.
When I was in Catholic school and we were learning about science and we were learning about energy, and I was told that, the three laws, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed. Energy is and always has been. And I was like, it sounds very similar to how you describe God or the universe or things like that. It just sounds like you're talking about something similar. And they never really gave me a good philosophical understanding of any kind of similarities or what it could possibly mean. But as a kid who was 9 years old, I certainly took that to heart and considered maybe what they mean is, like, maybe back when they wrote this stuff, when the Bible was being written, when holy men were studying and coming up with ideas, they were conveying their understanding of the universe without our modern sensibilities. So that brings us to simulation theory, where you get people who are seemingly atheists saying, I kid you not, a more advanced entity than us created this universe for a purpose with rules and expects something from us. And then I'm like, I can't tell if you're a holy man or a simulist. Are you a tech bro from Silicon Valley, or are you someone trying to explain the rudimentary religion to me?
The simulation language that people use now, if it persuades anyone, it's fine by me. But it's better even than the idea of energy. You recognized a similarity between something in the created world and the creator of that world. But the idea that God just is synonymous with the world, or that God just is the world and there's a little God left over, which is called panentheism, that is different from the Christian idea and the monotheism and the way things really are. The simulation theory is a better mapping of that, because you have God who is entirely self-sufficient, who does not need us, who creates the world in this act of love out of nothing and makes us in his own image. That is, in the modern way we talk about it, just some geeky programmer who makes us.
Now
in a
get
computer,
this. I often hear people say something like, well, if God created the universe, who created God? And it's just like, well, hold on. Now you're ascribing our physical limitations to something that is beyond our physical limitations. But here's a better way to explain it all. Y'all have played The Sims?
I have, all four of them.
Are The Sims smart enough to comprehend this reality or existence?
The Sims aren't smart.
Exactly. But they do their little thing. They live in their little universe. They don't have a degree of consciousness. They are not smart. That's us.
Yeah.
We are the Sims. We are the very stupid, bumbling around, and then we cannot comprehend what exists beyond.
Do you believe, when you
world.
think about destiny and free will, do you think that we're just destined to play a part in this chemical reaction?
No, it's
I think the likely, I wouldn't say I'm as definitive as Michael, but I believe we're here for a reason. I believe the universe was created for a purpose. I believe that it's entirely possible the universe is actually only 5,000 years old. And that is, I'm not saying I believe that wholeheartedly. I'm saying it's possible if you are someone who believes in simulation theory. The idea being, you've played Grand Theft Auto?
Oh, yeah. That was the only video game as a teenager that I played because it was just so shocking. I got a real kick out.
Let me. I want to point this out. When you played Grand Theft Auto, there is no point in that video game where people built buildings.
Yeah.
Where a construction crew came in and constructed a skyscraper. It just always has been. Yeah. And that universe was created specifically in the year 2013 or whatever, and it just came into existence. And so I find it fascinating that people who believe in simulation theory can't understand the same argument from a religious perspective that the universe was created 5,000 years ago.
I don't like that argument. I used to think that nothing existed unless I was perceiving it, that everything was a wave of infinite possibility outside of my perception, and my perception collapsed reality, and this is just a simulation I'm experiencing. It was very egocentric.
It's called solipsism.
And other people were like, Ian, you freak. I'm part of this too. Like, what's wrong? Where did you go? You're not the Ian I used to know. And so I think it's possible that it's both that and everyone's experiencing that. Because of that, it is all real, but it's all a wave of infinite possibility. I mean, it is possible.
So aren't those mutually contradictory?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. So they can't simultaneously be true.
Well, they can't. Contradictions can exist in nature.
No.
What?
Well, like quantum computing allows something to be a 1 and a 0 at the same moment.
Yes.
That's
true.
You're saying that there are possibilities that can collapse down into actualities.
That's the physical perception of I don't want to misquote the double slit experiment, but things where like electrons work as function as a cloud until you put a perception on them, then they collapse into where they're at. But you don't know where they're going to be at until you look.
Yeah. But now, but what you're suggesting is now, I'm always a little hesitant when people bring up quantum things because I just find, physics is very hard, and I because all of the quantum language is so fantastical, people tend to turn them to their own ideological or theological purposes. So I'm a little cautious with it. But are you suggesting that scientists have discovered a way to violate Aristotle's law of non-contradiction?
I'm not familiar with Aristotle's
Which is the
law.
idea that mutually contradictory things can't simultaneously exist. Well, kind of like women's bathrooms and transgenderism can't simultaneously
I disagree
exist.
because I think someone could be a man and a trans woman at the same time.
But not a female.
Correct. They could be a female and a trans man, but they're still both.
In this regard, what we're currently, if assuming you believe all of the companies that have claimed this, quantum computing is right. So computers operate with yes and no gates, ones and zeros. Quantum computing allows the calculation to exist as a 1 and a 0 in the same space at the same time. So the calculations happen rapidly.
Oh, sure. So I understand. I understand the
not rapidly, but instantaneous.
Right. No, I understand that from the perspective of rapidity, but I don't really understand. And we're speaking in language that is figurative, even when we talk about ones and zeros. I don't really understand what it means for these contradictory things to be simultaneous.
Another contradiction.
So basically,
contradiction
I'll give you an
this.
analogy.
I'll show
Right.
you.
Well, let me explain. Yeah. If let's say you want to brute force a password, right?
Yeah.
Imagine it like you have an ant farm.
Yeah.
When you're looking through the glass, you can see all these little paths and trails that go all the way down in little shapes, like a maze.
Yeah.
If you were to try and send in one drop of water at a time to navigate that maze, it gets blocked. You try another drop, it gets blocked. That's brute forcing to get to the bottom.
Yeah.
Quantum computing would be pouring water straight in the top, so the whole it goes, and it instantly gets you to the bottom and gives you that access.
Here's an example of a contradiction, a simple contradiction. Like when you look at that number, what number do you see?
Well, I see 9.
I see a 6.
But you see a 6.
And we're both right.
Well, no, we don't know which way is the top of the paper.
I don't think there is a top of the paper.
There is a top of the paper.
But who's going to decide?
Well, I can tell you, I've got good evidence for it. So I'll grab this. I'm pleased to say that I'm right about what the number is because I can see that the paper was pulled from your notebook out this way. Right,
so, you're wrong.
So I'm wrong?
Yes. Look where the margin on the paper is.
Okay, you're right. So
I got you.
if I were more observant and more scientific, I would have noticed where the margin was on the paper.
What did you say? You said 9?
You flip it. Yeah, so there it is.
The margin's at the top.
6. Yep.
It's the 6.
Listen, I'm a modern person. I don't use notebooks.
You were right. It is a 9 from your perspective.
But no, I unfortunately Tim was right and I was wrong and you were right.
If we had
that's Mary. But the reason is the paper has a direction objectively. What I can know using my perception and using my reason where the paper came from, what the orientation of the paper is, and once I know that, I can know if this is a 6 or a 9. And Ian, I will admit, I'll be the bigger man. You were right.
So assume there was no paper. It was just outside in the wilderness. You came upon that symbol. It doesn't. There's no relativism. It just your perception is what it is.
No. Hold on. Let me answer this for you, Ian. Let me see the paper.
Yep.
So the way we deduced that this was in fact a 6 and not a 9 is first Michael tried to point out the tear, and he assumed it came from this side of the paper, but you were holding it upside down, so you assumed it came this way. In fact, Ian pulled it out from the other side. The margin is at the top.
Yep.
If the margin was not there and we couldn't determine what it was, that doesn't mean it is a 6. It is a 9. It means we don't have enough evidence to form the correct conclusion.
But it is a 6 and it is a 9.
No, Tim is right.
Both at once. That's the correct contradiction of reality that can exist.
No. Ian, I disagree, and I'll explain. If someone were to write a password onto a piece of paper and they wrote 666, and it was a square Post-it note that with no sticky, it was like a square piece of paper, and they dropped it somewhere, it was intended. The intention and the code itself is 666, meaning if you want to unlock the door, it's 666. Someone comes upon that paper and they say, I don't know the orientation of the paper. It may be 9, it may be 6. The answer is, I don't know. Not that it's 9 because I choose it to be. Because then, if you go to the keypad terminal and type 999, door won't open.
You're applying relativism. If there's nothing to relate it to, you just have to take it at face value.
But in objective reality, there are things to relate it to and to ground it in. So
Always.
to use Tim's example, there's the adhesive line on the sticky. So that could give you some evidence of which way it is. Now, let's say the adhesive rubbed off. Well, you're going to have to look and see, is there a little hint of that adhesive left? Or maybe it got ripped off. But
Unless the intention of the individual was to make an obscure symbol to confuse people, it is either a 6 or a 9.
I think the
our inability to understand the intent of the person who crafted that symbol does not negate what the symbol
Sometimes
is.
in nature there is no intent; it just is. And the experience of being human is our attempt to rationalize.
But what
On
we're
the
saying is there's
contrary.
always intent.
there is.
Well-
and always purpose and telos.
And
to everything in the world.
let's take it one step further, Ian. If this symbol appeared on a tree because a lightning struck it, and it was sideways, and someone came up and said, "Is it a 6, a 9, an E?" Well, I think it's a 6. Well, I think it's a 9. The reality is it's a mark from a lightning strike.
It's all three of those.
It's not. It's not any
surely
of them.
is. Yes.
In order for it to be the symbol you describe it as, it must relate to the language, the abstract ideological structure the person ascribed it to. If a fish flops on the ground and draws this symbol, I'm not going to say that fish just wrote a number for me. I'm going to say the fish flopped on the ground. Kind of looks like a 6. Kind of looks like a 9.
But you're establishing a lot of relative aspects to the position. Like if someone walks into nature and that is just on the ground, it depends on what angle. If you come at it from one side, it looks like a 9. If you come at it from the other, it looks like a 6.
Well, what you're really getting at here is a distinction between the way actually that the left and the right view the world, which is as one of a world of interpretation or a world of activism and the imposition of will. So the idea of law, actually, the idea of whether that's a 6 or a 9, the conservatives would look at that and say, look, there is objective reality, there is an intelligibility to the universe, I have a faculty of reason, and so I can interpret and I can learn things from the world. Whereas the way that the modern left, the very relativistic, self-centered left, and very willful, wrathful left would look at that and say, I don't give a damn what it's supposed to mean. I'm going to deny my faculties of reason. I'm going to pretend that men are actually women. I'm going to say that babies aren't really babies. And it's going to be whatever the hell I want it to be.
Let me pull this into this analogy. The right takes the approach, I think, that you and I described, Michael, where you'll see the symbol and they'll say, how did the symbol come to be and what meaning does it intend to convey? The symbol exists. I would like to understand why it exists. The left's perspective is there's a symbol. I'm going to tell you what I want it to be.
But
words mean it's a Humpty Dumpty, right? Words can mean whatever I want them to.
But
whatever empowers me.
Which is what political correctness is too.
The right using rationality, I think that is a good method towards describing meaning. But
No, to interpreting meaning.
To interpreting
not
meaning.
Not ascribing meaning, but to interpreting.
and
the
so
meaning.
you, incredibly rational, brilliant, probably genius,
Stop it,
genius
handsome.
level IQ, was certain that was a 9 after a moment of examining the situation,
it's
using your rationality.
And then
you
admitting
said-
you-
That
so
was
it-
one of the few times that I've been wrong.
And it's,
But I was
but
wrong, but I was wrong.
that's the point.
But I
Even
was-
the
no,
most
wrong.
brilliant rationalists
Ian.
can be wrong.
And-
Yes,
Yeah.
and being wrong does not mean it is a
No,
9.
but the thing
it
is,
means it was wrong.
The thing is, though, you weren't wrong. You were right. That was a
Stop
9.
trying to make me
was
feel
wrong.
better. I was wrong, man.
You were right, and you were right, and I was
No.
right.
No, in
it was
fact-
a 6, a 9, and a scratch mark on paper.
It actually isn't, Ian. You took a piece of paper with the margin on the top and you wrote a 6.
Well, I drew that shape. I wanted to see
Yes.
what number he thought it was. I thought it
Right.
was a 6.
So the point is, I think in the culture where this is actually a great conversation for people who are listening. I think this is important to understand the left's predominant view versus what we would describe as the right. The right includes post-liberals because the political factions are no longer about policy. It's now about understanding reality. And I grew up traditionally liberal. I think you did too, right, Michael?
Oh yeah, I'm from New York. I mean, everybody was.
Now you're theistic Christian conservative.
Yeah, I don't know what I am. Some kind of ism, you know. But I mean, I grew up. I was always kind of a young Republican type. You know, I had a little liberal phase. But to your point, Tim, even being a young Republican conservative type, but pretty much meant we were all liberals, like for much of the last 30 years.
So I like this analogy, this way to break down the way people see the world. And when I see this symbol, I look for the evidence. The way you drew this, Ian, on this paper with the paper's margin on top is how you would typically make a 6. Therefore, you drew a 6. You can call it whatever you want. I understand for this purpose, you were not intending to make it either symbol. The left does two things. The first, they jump to conclusions and then insist they know because of ego. When they see the piece of paper, they will say it's whatever they want it to be, a 9 or a 6, whatever suits their needs at the time. They are unwilling, typically, to listen to any evidence. The typical leftist perspective on this would be, hey, Look at that margin on top. That means it's a 6. Well, if that's offending their ego because they determined it to be a 9, they'll say you are wrong, and they'll make a similar argument to you, which is called sophistry. An attempt to make a fallacious argument to prove them right for the sake of their dominance over you because they believe there is no truth but power.
I don't think it is sophistry. I'm pointing out that it's both a 6 and a 9. That's not sophistry. That's just an observation.
Right. And what I'm explaining to you is, on a piece of paper with this orientation, you have drawn a 6.
I mean, that's not what Michael told me 10 minutes ago.
Michael,
Because I was wrong. But
I don't
you
think
see,
you were.
Okay,
but well, now you're wrong.
But
I drew an upside down 9. I'm just going to be clear.
This is my point. Yeah, you actually didn't. You actually drew a 6.
I mean, that's an upside down 9, man. Flip it upside down.
It's actually not.
It's an ugly looking 9, but it sure is.
You drew this from.
That's how I draw, yeah.
That's not how you make 9s.
I mean,
so my point is simply this.
honestly, I was drawing a 6.
yes, you were. Thank you for the
was.
honesty.
And-
You're
and-
saying there is truth
And
here.
I thought you might think it was a 9.
Yes.
And if I
And
wished
you-
it was a square white piece of paper with no
You
margin for the
succeeded
argument.
at deceiving me, Ian. But this
it's
actually
disappointing.
this gets to exactly what was going on last night at Pittsburgh. By the way, we were supposed to have a debate, and conservatives are more inclined to have debates, and debates are about pursuing logic to come to the truth. And the libs were outside throwing explosives, and actually this gets back down to the Bible. You know, there's an important moment in the Bible when Christ goes in and he's hanging out with these two ladies, Mary and Martha, and one of the sisters is sitting contemplating what Christ is saying. And the other sister is serving the lunch and is busy and doing all these things. And what Christ says is the contemplative life is the better portion. Not to say that we shouldn't feed ourselves and, you know, we're living in time and space. We have to do certain things to maintain our bodies. But that contemplation, interpretation is actually better than the active life. And we obviously need both of these things, but we need, if we're going to use our will, it has to be in accord with intellect. Otherwise, we're just going to start throwing explosives at the wall.
You can look at the way I wrote those letters to determine what numbers they are.
I think
96B.
So what I did was I flipped it upside down and then I wrote a 9 and a 6. Nines and 6 are not drawn the same way. When a person is taught to write, they don't draw a 9 by starting from the bottom and then looping
You're
up
right.
around the top.
You're making
they start
a lot
from
of
the top and then go down.
I mean, you're making a lot of points based on like modern culture and all that. I know what you're saying.
Let me just say this.
I think the danger in all of this is what I'm saying is if you become steadfast on what you think it is and there is no other, like, I'm not
that
saying be
wasn't Michael.
postmodernist and be
Right, okay.
But when you claim something is what you think it is, it doesn't mean that it necessarily is to other people that way, and that's okay.
But
This
Ian,
both exist.
aren't
Okay.
you being that steadfast when you say it is both a 6 and a 9? You're insisting upon that.
I'm trying to be open-minded about it. Can be more than
You're
what I
being
think.
tyrannically
it is.
open-minded.
Okay, so here's the
You're
point.
not
Point.
open-minded to my open-mindedness.
And that's why I hate the phrase open-minded. It's meaningless.
Yeah,
But
you have to stop somewhere.
The point is, Ian, the right tends to have a view of there is meaning. Let me figure out what it is. And if it turns out the symbol never had the ascribed meaning, then it's not a 6 or a 9. It was a shape.
I just want to make sure people don't live their life based on what they thought that symbol was and just go all the way without considering that they might be wrong.
Right, and that's what the left does. And when you offend their ego, they insist they were right the
Oh,
whole
it's a big
time.
problem. It's a big problem among all sides and groups of people that I can see. But the problem is if you have too open of a mind, then you become a postmodernist where it can be anything.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.